Found a side quest!
Hello everyone, Alec Eldridge the SideQuest Gamer here, and I'm going to review AM2R Return of Samus, the fan-made remake of Metroid 2. And how is it? Well, I usually save my verdict for the review itself, but I'm just going to tell you, I love this game like everyone else does. And why is it so celebrated among the internet, and why is everyone so angry that Nintendo took it down? Fan games, one of the more illegal forms of game development unless the publisher has given their consent. This fan game is special in that regard because it kind of started a civil war between Nintendo fans. One side is saying that it's Nintendo's IP and that it should be respected, while the other side agrees to an extent, but their opposing idea states that Nintendo has abandoned the 2D Metroid formula since 2004. I'm kind of with the latter that thinks that fan games should exist if they're free and not threatening the sales of a similar product, and no, I don't consider Metroid 2 to be similar to AM2R. Like my colleague PK of PK's Retro Review said, we shouldn't really be mad at Nintendo for taking down AM2R, but rather the draconian copyright laws that exist today. I don't dislike Nintendo for what they did, as they legally can do it, but the Metroid 2D style has been dormant for like 12 years, and it is very annoying that they would do that to someone who just wants to bring back the spirit of the original playstyle. If they took down a New Super Mario Bros. Fan game that played like New Super Mario Bros. U, I'd be understanding because that would threaten their sales of that similar product. If they took down a fan game that played like the Galaxy games, I'd also be very understanding. Even a Zelda fan game being taken down would be fine by me, even if it's 2D, because A Link Between Worlds did successfully bring back the old formula and merged it with the new capabilities of the 3DS hardware. But the difference between those examples and AM2R is that the Mario and Zelda franchises are still going on, while Metroid is pretty much alive, then dead for several years, then alive again, but not as we remember it. People are not mad at Nintendo for taking down AM2R. Okay, maybe some are, but most people are just really mad at the meaning of the AM2R takedown. 2D Metroid is dead, but not allowed to continue unless it's by their means and their means only. It would be really nice if Nintendo hired developer Dr. M64 and agreed to distribute the game on Wii U and 3DS, but as of writing, that isn't the case, and I doubt that will ever be the case. I've had one spiteful individual call me a pessimist for not being pleased with Metroid's future. At this point, I won't even take that as a pejorative because Metroid's future is really uncertain, and a wise person once said that a pessimist is what an optimist calls a realist. I doubt Nintendo would ever plan on remaking the fun but flawed Metroid 2 because from my observations, they're usually not interested in going back in this day and age. I don't care how good Metroid Federation Force is because it's still just a spin-off. It's great that it exists and I might buy it eventually because from what I've played of Blast Ball, it's really fun, but it's not the adventures of Samus exploring new worlds and uncovering ancient technology as a means to complete the mission given to Samus. I see Federation Force kind of like the Star Wars spin-off movies coming out. It's great that Rogue One exists, but everyone is more looking forward to Episode 8 just to see what the Resistance is up to. Regardless, because the DMCA notice didn't come until a day and a half after AM2R's release, and after version 1.1's release, Nintendo officially ordered them to not make any updates. AM2R is out on the internet thanks to alternative distributors, if you know what I mean. I do wonder why Nintendo didn't take it down during its 9-year development cycle, but then it would have never been played and enjoyed by anyone, and that would have been worse. At least now the option is there with or without Nintendo's consent. That may seem unfair to Nintendo, but do bear in mind, they're the same company that doesn't exactly respect copyright laws themselves, with them mercilessly copyright claiming videos that are clearly fair use, like review videos for example. I know two wrongs don't make a right, but I do want to throw that out there so you can judge for yourself. Regardless of how you acquire it, this is by far one of the best remakes of any video game that I've ever played, and heck, one of the best games to come out in the summer of 2016. The original Metroid 2 was pretty decent, but it did have some major issues that were in desperate need of an update, and updated they are in this game. From giving the player a customizable control scheme to adding an overworld map, already it feels way better than the original. First off, there's an intro talking about the plot of Metroid 1. It's a very nice callback callback to the intro of Super Metroid with its still images mixed with sprite animations. Even the music is a callback to it. Same story as before in the Metroid 2 instructions manual. The Federation sent out a group of soldiers and scientists to this planet, SR388, but they have since disappeared. They call Samus to search for the survivors and to eliminate the Metroid threat once and for all. But unlike the Game Boy version, you actually see the survivors, but we'll get to them later. You land on the planet, but instead of a starry night sky like the original game, it's in the afternoon and resembles the SR388 we saw in the intro sequence of Metroid Fusion. In fact, this planet is designed to resemble Fusion's interpretation of this planet. So the game starts from here, and while the core objective is relatively the same, reaching from point A to point B is a completely different story. Remember how the Metroid battles in the Game Boy version were kind of pathetically easy, with the only difficulty being if you're low on missiles. There wasn't a whole lot to them in strategy, but these Metroids will give you a better challenge. Instead of simply nuking their heads and backs with missiles, you have to shoot them in their gelatinous weak spot, which I really like. The Omega and Zeta Metroids no longer just float around in midair despite having functional back legs as we saw in Fusion. They've become bipedal and are really challenging, with the Omega Metroids being especially tricky to frustrating degrees in AM2R version 1.0. Dr. M64 did make the Omegas much easier in version 1.1 though, so thank goodness for that update. Even then, they're still harder than the Zeta Metroids, which is a nice contrast to how the original Metroid made the later Omega Metroids easier than the Zeta Metroids. These Metroid designs seem to be based off the computer diagrams of Metroid physiology you saw in Fusion's restricted laboratory. Props to Dr. M64 for making that kind of callback to Fusion. Come to think of it, this game, despite being a Metroid 2 remake, has many callbacks to other Metroid games. The intro I already mentioned was a tribute to Super Metroid's intro. The Flying Torizo has both the larval and moth Chica themes from Metroid Prime 2. You can even fight bosses like Arachnus and Samus. Arachnus was in Metroid 2 as the only boss battle that wasn't a Metroid, but the colorization and attack patterns seem to be more based off its X-Parasite appearance if anything. And Samus attacks like it did in Fusion, but unlike Fusion, I had an alright time facing it. There's even an abandoned GFS spaceship that I guess is supposed to be like a mix of the wrecked ship from Super Metroid as well as Valhalla from Prime 3 Corruption in terms of atmosphere. Heck, I even believe this particular spaceship was in Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, as that game took place before Metroid 2. According to Wikitrade, there's even callbacks that I didn't even realize in that ship, like how nearby there's the room that Samus will be later infected by the X-Parasite in Fusion, and how I fight the Genesis creature I fought in Fusion, and even within the ship is like a museum of callbacks like the Nightmare's arms, and even a part of the six-legged security robot you fought twice in Fusion, almost as if they're under construction.
Foreshadowing?
Now, there is a presentation reason for these callbacks, because for non-Metroid fans, the fourth installment known as Fusion took place on a space station that mainly studied the life and specimens of SR388 before the X-Parasite took over the ship. In other words, Arachnus, Genesis, and Samus were inhabitants of SR388, and it would only make sense to include them in this remake here as proof of their existence, as opposed to the original SR388 being nothing but a series of caverns with wildlife similar to Zebus and a bunch of evolved Metroids. That's it. For the callback boss encounters, I'm glad that the attack patterns are different enough where it does feel similar, but different enough not to feel like a rehash.
I did kind of see Sarah's coming because there are water areas in this game, but when and where it'll appear, I didn't know. So when it did appear, I was still surprised by its appearance.
But besides the additions like the callbacks, there are so many new things to already existing areas. The temples you explore are similar in layout to the original, but some areas are either expanded upon or changed to complement the updated gameplay, like the ability to cling to ledges, and of course the Spider Ball and the Shine Spark ability. I really like the additions of the distribution center, as it makes backtracking so much easier with the fast travels tubes connected to nearly every area in the game. Version 1.1 even added one that connects to the entrance of the final area in case you wanted to do some quick backtracking for 100% missile expansions and E-tanks. It's especially welcome since AM2R follows a more linear structure of the world the Game Boy version had. While the Game Boy version had virtually no backtracking while AM2R did it it right with the additions of these warp tubes. Although there is one closed off tube that leads downward, but I as well as others on Reddit don't know where it leads to. It could have been cool if it led to a secret area like a laboratory with an X-Parasite inside a capsule that you cannot open, but I guess we'll never find out where it leads since Dr. M64 isn't allowed to make any more updates. The distribution center also has an area that will release all those spheres into the rest of the world, so all of those white doors nearby those stone indents serve only as locks, and those spheres are the keys to open them. I love these puzzles as it shows Dr. M64 had a few ideas of his own that he wanted to incorporate into a Metroid game. It would make sense for the Chozo to make these very articulate puzzles to prevent access to secrets in the planet they once colonized. Because if you're going to make a Metroid game that involves the Chozo statues, you kind of have to raise more questions and give vague answers with the design of the world itself. What are the Torzo? Who created the Metroid species? Why does this area exist? What purpose do these machines serve? The Hydro Station is a good example of this, as it shows a network of pipes and water going through them should you activate the machines below them. It could be implied that the Chozo use these machines to purify their water supply, or maybe give water to plant life where water is scarce throughout SR388. Who knows? The lava area also raises many questions like what the giant Chozo statue was supposed to symbolize. Was it based off its most celebrated warrior? Was it an explorer that was in charge of this area? Is it their deity if they even have one? And why did they build the area housing a super bomb right next to a volatile reactor that'll destroy the place if Samus uses it to exit the room? Was it a test for the orange savior carved in stone from Metroid Zero mission? Otherwise, it seems like a waste of resources. Were the Chozo aware of this orange savior, or were only the Zebezian colonists Chozo aware of this prophecy? After all, the description of one of their security robots said that it detected stolen artifacts on Samus, meaning that the upgrades to her suit were not meant to fulfill some prophecy, unless that was a test and the description was merely an inference made by her scanner's computer. There is so much lore added in AM2R, but it's not fanfiction-y where it answers what was supposed to be left to the imagination. And as a fan of the franchise, that is really hard to do, as who doesn't want to answer the biggest question left by the franchise? As fans of a beloved franchise, we don't need to know everything about a game, as I do think some of the best stories in games are the ones that keep you thinking if you are one to absorb all these little and large details everywhere.
For all we know, the Chozo could have been drunk one night and was like, you know what would be a good idea if we just have like a bunch of puzzles laying about with our precious artifacts as rewards, and we'll solve them tomorrow when we're like sober or high. And then they all starved to death and turned into stone as a result. I don't know, it's just a baseless hypothesis.
There is some explanation thanks to the automatic scanner in Samus's power suit. Every time you enter a new area, your suit scans it and talks about the possible reason of its existence, as well as its main inhabitants. In fact, it also scans bosses, describing their purpose and even hints at how to defeat them. Newly acquired power-ups are also given descriptions as well, talking about their function. This scanner is really the ultimate callback to the Prime trilogy, although this time you don't have to go out of your way to manually scan things like enemies and bosses. You never really had anything like it in the 2D Metroid games previously. All the data you did have was the map and acquired abilities. That was it. Fusion and Zero Mission did have a missile and E-Tank list showing how many of those items are left in the area you're in. That feature is unlocked when you beat the game on your save file once, which is something AM2R is surprisingly missing to my knowledge. I'm not sure if it's because the entire map is not divided into segments or not, but it is something I did notice. When my colleague Exo Paradigm Gamer, you probably all know him, suggested in his review of the game that there be a percent counter in the game menu, Dr. M64 actually commented on his video saying he enjoyed the review and planned on taking that very suggestion for the next update, but unfortunately with Nintendo emailing Dr. M64 ordering him to no longer make updates to AM2R, there won't be a version 1.2 with that addition. But even without the list or percent counter, I will say of all the Metroid games I've played, this one was probably the easiest to 100%. For one, the Shine Spark puzzles aren't as obnoxious as they were in Zero Mission. 2, the warp tubes make backtracking really easy where I can get in and out of an area in no time. And 3, if there's an area you couldn't reach until you got a power-up, well, you can actually leave a marker on your map to remind you there's something there to go back to, instead of checking every room to see if you missed anything, which was what all the Metroid games I've played are guilty of. So this addition cuts down any futile backtracking.
It's not that I don't enjoy spending 20 plus minutes checking every room and finally finding the one item I missed, but the map marker just makes things so much easier to find. It makes things so much less time consuming.
So gameplay wise, it looks and plays like a post-Super 2D Metroid game. All the familiar abilities from Metroid 2 work just as good as they did, and all the new abilities we saw in later installments like the gravity suit and stacked beams make a return in this remake as well. Now this may be a nitpick, but everything feels like a Metroid game except for the frame rate of certain creatures. Like, the frame rate of the animations look a little too good, and the movement of creatures like the Queen and the Metroids looks a little too smooth, if that makes any sense. Like, the head and movement feels different than something Nintendo would have made for the Game Boy Advance. It's not really negative criticism, but if there's something that doesn't feel like Nintendo made it, it's probably the animations of certain creatures, but that's really about it. As a 2D Metroid game, it's the best looking of them all. The camera is zoomed out akin to Super Metroid, and the graphics look like Super Metroid if they were remastered. The slight problem with the GBA Metroid games was how the color saturation felt a little bit off compared to Super Metroid. They look good, but from an aesthetic point of view, they don't really compete with AM2R in the long run. Exploration is emphasized more than it was in the original, making the search for the missiles and E-tanks really satisfying, and thanks to the addition of the map, is not an obnoxious chore when attempting to look for the next area. And the music is faithfully recreated. While there weren't a lot of good soundtracks in the original, the 4 that did stand out were the Surface theme, the Golden Temple theme, the Laboratory theme, and the Metroid Hatchling theme at the end. Those soundtracks get the orchestral treatment, the Golden Temple theme especially, as its main melody was not used once, but twice. The actual Golden Temple has kind of a Metroid Prime feel to it in terms of arrangement, while the Breeding Grounds have a horror theme going for it with the melody being played at a slower pace. AM2R includes many remixes of soundtracks and even remixes of songs from other games in the series. I mentioned the Chaika theme being used for the Torizo boss battle, but in the power plant in that lava area, there's a remix of Lower Norfair, you know, the lava area, from Super Metroid, where the main melody is a little quieter and then there's not any loud choir or tribal drums. Arachnus has a remix of its battle in Fusion, and there's just so many I can list. That is auditory fanservice at its finest. It has enough instrumental variation to feel like an entirely new soundtrack and not like an unoriginal rehash of other games' soundtracks. It took me a few playthroughs to recognize some of the remixes were actually remixes of other game soundtracks, like how Hydro Station was the overgrowth area in Super Metroid, which made me love the soundtrack even more than I did already. I can't believe the entire game's soundtrack was just composed by 3 people. That is so impressive by just a small team.
And as for the final additions to AM2R, Dr. M64 did flesh out the story a lot more than the Game Boy original could, mainly describing Samus's search for Federation survivors because the landing party kinda lost contact with the Federation. And also, I'm going to talk about the story a lot in depth, so skip to this point of the video so you can play the game for yourself, and then rewatch the video hearing my critiques of the story, and then I get twice the ad revenue. I mean, what ad revenue? I don't do it for the money, I do it for the subscribers.
If you played the original, Samus lands on planet SR388 on a mission to destroy 39 Metroids. She first encounters an Alpha Metroid, and as she travels deeper and deeper into the planet, the Metroids evolve into more powerful, dangerous forms. Although this time, Samus seems less genocidal as they now pop out and attack her, giving her a reason to defend herself. She eventually finds some leftover Federation equipment in one area with dead soldiers wearing exosuits. Later in the game, when she encounters the first Omega Metroid, she sees the surviving Federation forces trying to take it out, but they are unfortunately killed off by it, and Samus kills the Omega Metroid itself. Samus goes to the final area where the last Metroid is, but as she goes through a tunnel under the larval Metroid, their numbers increase to 9, and in the next few rooms, Samus takes out 8 terrifying larval Metroids. And then with screaming heard below in the last room, she encounters the last Metroid, being the Queen herself, but this time, she will move and pursue Samus after taking a few hits, destroying several walls in the process. And at the last phase, you can either pump her head full of missiles, stun her, go down her throat, and then bomb her belly, or you can shoot her with missiles, stun her, go down her throat, but instead of using normal bombs, you use a power bomb instead, which has a cinematic white fading explosion, and as the flash clears, you see green slimy remains of the queen.
Ew.
And like in Metroid 2, the larval Metroid hatches and follows you around, and note how it's designed to resemble the 16-bit black and white intro sequence depicting that scene. Samus decides not to kill this innocent creature, takes it with her, and if you've played Super Metroid, you know where the baby Metroid is delivered. She leaves SR388 and credits roll. After the credits, you do hear a woman saying, "The last Metroid is in captivity, the galaxy is at peace," followed by a to be continued caption. There is kind of a subplot in that optional area where there was a Federation ship that landed and was abandoned. You then find the Genesis Predator who killed the crew of the ship. This was honestly the only area in that game that felt a little tacked in there, because the entrance is the same as the exit, making it feel isolated from the rest of the world. It's not bad by any means, as you get some optional power-ups that are useful, but I felt more could have been done, like having a tunnel lead back to your ship at the left canyon, kind of like Chozodia connecting to Crateria in Metroid Zero mission.
Spoilers over. Time for my spoiler-free final thoughts.
I like how Dr. M64 fleshed out the story in this remake, as it answers a question that was raised by the original Metroid's manual. I get that hardware limitations would prevent them from telling the story they wanted to tell back then, although ending text would have been good enough. That was possible with the hardware limitations. Regardless, even though it was a simple premise, I'm glad Dr. M64 answered the question as to what happened to the Federation team that Samus was looking for. It wasn't just left to the imagination this time. They actually showed what happened. And overall, if you haven't guessed already, I love this game. While I don't think it's as good as Super Metroid, because while I love this game, I think Super Metroid was more immersive, atmospheric, and had a darker storyline that was important to the Metroid franchise that I got more invested into, but I do think it's better than Zero Mission and especially Fusion, taking what worked with those games and upping the ante. It's probably either my third or second favorite Metroid game of all time, and if you haven't played it, I recommend downloading it, although have your antivirus software armed, because if you can't find a friend who has version 1.0 or 1.1, then you're at the mercy of alternative distributors who may or may not have malevolent intentions. AM2R Return of Samus would fit in the Masterful tier of games. Not only is it one of the best fan games out there, but it's one of the best remakes, period. While some fan projects don't really know how to work with the continuity of an established franchise, making it come out as fan-fiction-y, Dr. M64 shows that sometimes fans really do know how to make a high-quality game while maintaining the quality standard of the franchise. Now it's 2017. I wrote this review back in October, but never got around to making it, so I feel the need to add more to the script after witnessing the impact of AM2R. And before you ask, yes, I still maintain the opinions I wrote back in October. It was a success in terms of fan game downloads. Everyone played it, and even those who grew up with the original declared AM2R the remake Metroid 2 deserved, and rightfully so. Near the end of the year, when the 2016 Game Awards were happening, fans were voting in AM2R and the other well-known fan game, Pokemon Uranium, to win the Best Fan Creation Award. But Nintendo had both games removed as nominees, and there was an outrage not as massive as the initial removal, but now both sides agree that there was no reason for Nintendo to do that. I mean, there's no financial gain for AM2R winning that award, so it's harmless for AM2R or Uranium to receive it. The only nominees at the awards show were Brutal Doom 64 and Ender All the Shards of Order, with the latter, I believe, being the winner. With that disappointment being the last time AM2R was mentioned across the media, gamers still celebrated it, while the official Metroid franchise's future remains uncertain with the poor sales of Federation Force. But I'm honestly more interested in the future of Milton Guasti, aka Dr. M64. What will he do after 8 years of creating this fan game, only to have it be shut down? Since he said on the official AM2R blogspot that this was his way of learning how to program, he is now a professional programmer, so it's not like those 8 years went down the drain. With that being said, I would be very interested in seeing what he will do with these skills. Will he make his own game, perhaps in the Metroidvania style, but with his own take? I would love to see that released on Steam and other platforms. But until then, we can always support Dr. M64 in his future endeavors, and support Nintendo by downloading the original Metroid 2, Super, Zero Mission, and Fusion just to show there is most definitely interest in that particular playstyle. Or maybe we won't ever get a Nintendo-developed remake of Metroid 2, but we can hope for perhaps a 2D Metroid game on Nintendo Switch or 3DS that could have polygonal graphics. If New Super Mario Bros., Kirby's Return to Dreamland, The Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, and Retro Studios' Donkey Kong Country games are evidence enough that going back to the roots while incorporating new ideas works, I don't see how 2D Metroid can't have the same treatment. And if history does repeat itself, we may get a Metroid game on the Nintendo Switch someday, but probably not for a while. NES Metroid fans had to wait 5 years for Metroid 2, Super Metroid fans had to wait 8 years for not only a 2D sequel, but also Samus' first 3D adventure. Even if I'm a little pessimistic about the low sales of Metroid Prime Federation Force, I will concur that there's the possibility that I may be wrong, and that maybe Metroid's future isn't as desolate as I'm making it out to be. I hope I'm wrong, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Sometimes the most dedicated fans keep a dormant franchise alive by making pieces of art celebrating what the franchise means to them and everyone else. I do hope for the best of the future of the Metroid franchise because I don't want things to end off on Federation Force, not hating on the game or anything like that, but I do want to see the continued adventures of Samus Aran, in future installments at least. I mean, there's so many ideas that just have to be made into a video game. So until Samus's next mission, thank you all so much for watching and remember to stay awesome. Now, excuse me, I'm going to grab a Jill sandwich.
That's a hint for the next video, by the way.